And there's a couple that aren't at Liberty. Some of them got switched to Vincent.
Stealing the county water.
Convene this meeting of the Centerville Town Council, February 17th, 2022. If everyone would rise for the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We are going to start with a review of minutes from past meetings, February 3rd, 2022, which was a brief meeting. And anybody want to make any changes to that? We can accept a motion to.
So moved. Motion to approve the minute. Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
So moved. Thank you. All right, we'll move into a closed session statement. The Town Council met in closed session on Thursday, February 17th, 2022 at 6:15 p.m. at the Liberty Building, 107 North Liberty Street, second floor meeting room to discuss personnel in accordance with the Maryland Open Meetings Act. 4 members of the Town Council voted to close the session. The authority to close the session is found in Section 3-305 of the General Provisions Article. I believe 5 members of the Town Council voted to close the session. Excuse me. The Town Council discussed the following topics. Personnel discussed evaluation of employees. We consulted with our counsel. We discussed potential litigation, and we discussed land acquisition with our attorney as well. No actions were taken. The following members and staff were present: Stephen K. Klein, President; Jeffrey D. Keel, Vice President; Shelby C. Anania, Eric Johnson Jr., and Ashley H. Kaiser, members; Charles Chip Kugel, Town Manager; Sharon Van Emberg, Town Attorney; and Carolyn Brinkley, Town Clerk. The meeting adjourned at 6:50 p.m. All right, we will move into Citizens Forum. Citizens are requested to keep their comments to 3 minutes. Carolyn, has anybody signed up to provide comment?
No.
Nope. All right. Thank you. With the record show, no citizens have come forward. And we'll move into public hearing for Resolution 1-2022.
You still have
Are we-
3 minutes before you can do that.
So we should, okay, perfect.
You can go on to something else if you
We
want.
can go on to something else, the consent agenda, perhaps?
No consent agenda.
There is no consent agenda.
No.
Do we want to talk about the parking meters, or is that might take a while?
Can I introduce our new program manager?
That would be wonderful.
Yeah, let's do that.
Janelle, if you could come up, have a seat here before the council. Council members, this is Ms. Janelle Turner. She is our new program manager. We'll be working in DPW, and I'll turn it over if you'd like to ask her any questions. We had the opportunity to interview her. It was an outstanding interview. We are extremely excited to have her join our staff.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
I've heard wonderful things about you.
Wonderful. That's good news.
We are glad you're here.
Yes,
Can you
very
tell us a
much.
little bit about yourself?
Yes, so I actually live in Glen Burnie, Maryland, so a little commute. I lived in Georgia for about 10 years, grew up in Annapolis, Maryland. I returned 10 years ago to Maryland. I am a current PMP holder, and I've been in project management for over 20 years.
Nice.
I'm probably fooling some of you guys right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's about it. That's about it.
So when you decided to apply, what got you the most excited about Centerville?
So I learned a lot about Centerville in the process of the interview. I had never heard of Centerville prior to me interviewing. So after looking at the description and the construction and the vision of what the project was, it led me straight to it. Yeah. So the vision of the project and the growth, and after speaking with the team, I knew it was a great fit for me.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
Well, welcome.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, Janelle.
All right.
Anybody else? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
Excited to have you on board.
You guys are more than welcome.
It's 7:05.
Perfect.
Public hearing, Resolution 1-2022, Charter Amendments, Section 523. I just proceed right into this, right? Okay. The subject of this hearing is Resolution 1-2022 for the purpose of amending the town charter to repeal and replace Section 523 of the town charter. Mr. Chip Kugel will now provide background on Resolution 1-2022.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have talked about this a couple times in session. The genesis of this was that we were returning to council to ask for permission to buy every item over $10,000. And with our Department of Public Works, it was pretty much every purchase. Most of these requests were already approved in our budget. So what we were trying to do was execute the budget as outlined and as approved by the council, but still having to come back. The problem was there were a number of items that, with the way things have been going during the pandemic, that we would get a quote that was good for a finite period of time, often not 2 weeks. So by the time we had briefed it to council, we were going back to get an adjusted quote, and we were spending actually more money on the item than if we'd have just been able to buy it. And we had talked to you all individually as this, and decided to come forward with what we were going to propose with the approval. And a couple of times, council members pointed out as we were going through things, and we're going to have another one tonight, that we're killing time every couple weeks coming back and asking for things that were in the budget, were approved, but because of the amount, we had to come back. The numbers, we were asked by my predecessor, why are we doing this? And he said, it's how we've always been doing it. So once upon a time, $10,000 might have bought you a vehicle. But for most of the purchases for capital, we're going to exceed that number. And a couple times we did tickle the new number. So this gets us in a position to execute the budget with speed and not lose money in the process and delay moving forward on projects.
I will now call upon Carolyn Brinkley, Town Clerk, to present evidence of the published notice of this hearing.
Certificate of Publication, State of Maryland, County of Queen Anne. This is to certify that the annex legal advertisement has been published in the 1/28/22 Record Observer.
Thank you. We will first hear from all those in favor of proposed Resolution 1-2022, and then hear from those opposed. Please keep all comments to 3 minutes. You are welcome to provide written testimony to the Town Council as well.
Sorry. Welcome to this meeting of the Centerville Town Council. This is a public meeting, and we welcome your participation. By attending, you acknowledge that this session is recorded and aired live on QAC-TV 7. During the meeting, we ask that you turn your cell phones off and hold personal conversations outside the meeting room. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes per person. The Town Council respects and appreciates your desire and right to convey your message freely, and in keeping with the dignity of proceedings, we ask that all views be expressed in a respectful and civil manner. Comments longer than 3 minutes should be submitted in writing. If questions are a part of your comments, we'll refer those to the appropriate individual. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear from all those in favor of proposed Resolution 1-2022. We will now hear from all those opposing proposed Resolution 1-2022. The Centerville Town Council will consider all comments presented this evening before making a final decision regarding proposed Resolution 1-2022. Do I hear a motion to adjourn this hearing?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I now declare this hearing adjourned. All right, we'll move into the second public hearing of the evening. The subject of this hearing is Ordinance 1-2022 for the purpose of adding a new Chapter 105 of the Town Code to establish the procedures and requirements for the consideration and execution of purchases and contracts and matters generally related thereto. Mr. Kugel will now provide background on Ordinance 1-2022.
This part of the ordinance, council members and citizens, changes the expenditure limits. It moves up to $50,000, things that will be purchased by the town as a budget item and where we will receive quotes from more than one source. 50,000 above, these will also require advertised and sealed bids to be considered by the town. Written contracts for budgeted items below $100,000 may be approved and executed by the town manager. All written contracts greater than $100,000 shall be approved by the town council before being effective. Again, this changes, the bidding requirements are that we can, we have the sealed bid above that, below that $50,000 threshold. Below, we are still getting quotes to get the best price for us, but it allows us to move forward in an efficient manner. And also keep the council informed of all the purchases made, even though they are in the budget. Coming back, just as we would brief them before and ask permission to make the purchase will be executed, and we will then come before the council and let them know the things in the budget that have been executed, when and how, and what the end results were of those activities.
Thank you. I will now call upon Carolyn Brinkley, Town Clerk, to present evidence of the published notice of this hearing.
Certificate of Publication, State of Maryland, County of Queen Anne's. This is to certify that the Annex Legal Advertisement has been published in the 1/28/22 edition of the Record Observer.
Thank you. We will first hear from all those in favor of proposed Ordinance 1-2022, and then hear from those opposed. Please keep all comments to 3 minutes. You are welcome to provide written testimony to the Town Council as well. We'll dispense with the public comment guidelines since Carolyn just read those. We will now hear from all those in favor of proposed Ordinance 1-2022. We will now hear from all those opposing proposed Ordinance 1-2022. The Centerville Town Council will consider all comments presented this evening before making a final decision regarding proposed Ordinance 1-2022. Do I hear a motion to adjourn this hearing?
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
I now declare this hearing adjourned. We will move into old business. We will start with Resolution 1-2022, the Charter Amendment, Section 523. Any discussion? If not, entertain a motion.
Make a motion to approve Charter Amendment, or Resolution 1-2022, the Charter Amendment for Section 523.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. We'll move into Ordinance 1-2022, purchases and contracts. If there's any discussion, if not, we'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to accept Ordinance 1-2022.
Second.
All right, motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, the motion carries. Thank you. We'll move into a discussion about parking meters.
So we had some fruitful discussions amongst the town staff over the past couple days. It's my understanding that on a number of occasions, parking meters have been put into the budget and either not executed or withdrawn from the budget. The reality is that the parking meters as exist, while there is a realized revenue of $18,000 a year approximately, by the time we put in the labor cost and managing the parking meters, it's zero gain. The parking meters are also old. We are looking at, for FY23, putting in money for the parking meters and replacing half of the existing meters with digital meters that are also solar powered, so we're not managing the batteries. They will be, you could tap card, and then we can monitor those meters with telemetry, both seeing what's being put in and how much we're making and it going into the account, and then if we're seeing a meter that's faulty that we can't read. So in looking at this, the kiosks, if we were to do a kiosk system, are about $500 a month. So you're looking at least 2 kiosks, we're looking at $12,000 a year, just an overhead there, and then enforcement. We'd probably be operating at a net loss at that point. While it would provide the convenience of clearing or continually keeping parking spots within the downtown area open, we think it would be more efficient to replace some of the older meters over the next 2 years, get the modern meter that we can work with digitally, pay with digitally, and put less manpower into it to bring in that revenue. The second part of that will be enforcement for violations, and I have talked to our code enforcement officer. He is more than happy to do some extra and go through and cite citations in a partnership with the Centerville Police Department to monitor parking and keep that moving along. The price for a digital meter, refurbished digital meter, is about $3,000 each. But when you look at some of our older meters and replacing the internals and the level of effort to empty them every week, take the money down to the police station. If it's been raining, then have the money sit out and dry so that we can take it to the bank. And you can be careful about how you pour it into the bag because it's so heavy it could tear through the bag. It's labor intensive to gather up nickels, dimes, and quarters to do this. So we're looking at a proposal in the coming budget of about $105,000 for the first tranche of new meters. We estimate, rough order of magnitude, it'll be between 3 and 5 years before we'll be operating in a net gain with the new meters and code enforcement, helping with violations and collecting violations, and then moving forward, and at the same time keeping parking flowing downtown.
Well, the problem we're seeking to address here is turnover of vehicles, right? I mean, that really is, it's less a question of revenue than a question of
Correct.
turnover.
Correct.
I wonder if it would be cost effective to simply, hire someone to do, parking enforcement to enforce a 1-hour time limit.
Yeah, and my initial thought is that I would not be supportive of using our one part-time code enforcement person to do that. There are enough code issues in town to not turn that role into a meter maid, and so I hesitate to say we're gonna spend $105,000 and then also take the code enforcement person that we finally got and pull them over to parking enforcement. I mean, to me, that just sounds like a really bad buy, to buy used parking meters at that extreme cost. To me, the kiosks, while expensive, at least we're gonna give us the ability to give people some period of free parking, and then they'd have to pay to avoid the lack of turnover. At first blush, I would not be supportive of a purchase of a bunch of used parking meters that we still don't really have a plan for enforcement.
I would tend to agree. I do think downtown parking has gotten to the point now where it just seems like it's impossible to find a place on the square these days. We're trying to accrue the benefit to the business people, the business owners, but it seems like people at the businesses are just parking in the spots all day long.
Right.
So I'm just curious, what is the cheapest way we can get people moving in those out of those parking lots, parking spaces? And, I know Easton's got some 2-hour limitations right downtown. Are those enforced? Are those effective? I tend to see spots there. I'm just curious if we had a little bit of enforcement, maybe not a full-time meter person. I don't think that makes sense either, but just occasional enforcement would be enough to get people moving. If you had a sign that said, 1-hour limit.
Are you thinking no meters then whatsoever? Take away the
I
meters?
think the meters are a revenue wash one way or the other.
Yeah.
Even the current system with Joe's crew going and taking, as you said, carrying quarters around,
Labor intensive.
that's silly, right? But it's not about revenue for me. It's about people having a place to park.
Yeah, well, it would be pretty much a zero gain. There's going to be an initial investment. The thought with the parking meters vice the kiosk is it would be labor intensive to have somebody coming around hourly and making sure, the chalk mark on the tire, making sure they've got the tag. Now, there are other possibilities we can continue to explore. There are in fact apps that work with these things where you can do it from your phone, and we can continue to explore and mature the thought process for the council and bring it back.
Couple things there. If we went to an app parking system, I want to make sure there's still a way for people to pay with coins. I think we should not expect that everyone's going to have a phone that can run a parking app, that there's going to be people who are older or people who are indigent that need to be able to park also, for which a quarter is going to be the best way. So I just want to make sure when we're doing this research, I am not supportive of spending over $100,000 on used parking meters that to me don't solve the problem, because if you can pay with a credit card, people are just going to feed it all day if they want to park there.
True.
So enforcement to me sounds like the key, regardless of how someone pays to park, but I would not be supportive of switching to a solely electronic payment platform.
I tend to agree.
I think, there was talk about a parking study in previous budgets, and I'm not really supportive of spending a lot of money on studying a problem. I'd rather spend it on solving the problem. But it seems to me like, do we have a parking problem in Centerville? We pushed that off last budget because of COVID. You just didn't see the traffic downtown. It seems to be back. It's certainly back at the courthouse. And so I guess I'm wondering, what do we think the timeline is for parking at 105 North Liberty? Because that seems like it might be part of the solution.
So we have 101 Liberty, which was the parking lot purchased for Liberty Commerce. One of the thoughts is that if that were sold, returned to revenue, that the funds from that, because it's not a lot, could be used to fully pave out 105. There's grass areas and gravel areas where that could be finished off, properly paved, lined, and possibly metered. The challenge with back there is you also have residential parking for those that live there, and being able to differentiate, which might be a gated system where they would have a pass and they could go in and out, and others that would kind of at the kiosk buy it, insert your ticket, and through the gates. Looking at the cost of that, of course, before we travel down that line. But that would add more than we've got. I think it's 12 spots at 101 Liberty now that aren't metered, aren't generating any revenue. And sometimes I go past there and cars have been there for a while covered in snow, that folks are just using it almost as a free municipal, well, it is a free municipal lot, and they're leaving things there. And police department has got to go there a couple of times where a vehicle that looks like it's been abandoned, and checking out. And finally we spend time as staff running that down, finding out who owns it, and they come and get it and remove it. So getting rid of that property would generate the revenue to finish out the paving behind 105, which would also, I think, give us a long leeway before meeting the county's needs should that parking uptick happen, and we would eventually have to razz that building at some point. But for now, I think it would cover us adequately. There's a significant grass area back there, probably between 25 and 35 parking spots that could be added to the town.
But just so the public is clear, we are at some point going to be required to raise 105
At an undetermined time, yes.
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 Yeah.
to provide parking for the courthouse.
Yes.
That's the nature of it.
That is the plan. That is
Because we do get questions about 105, as you know.
Yes.
All the time. Okay, thanks.
Sure.
So if I can just comment, I am hoping that there's an opportunity that we could write some of our colleagues in MML, Maryland Municipal League, to see if there are other towns that have explored some of the options that we presented, because I would imagine there's some lessons learned out there. If we were to totally drop what we have now and some of the ideas that have been presented, and then regardless of where we go, I would not feel comfortable not having the enforcement piece laid out more explicitly. Because if it's going to be done very part-time, as was suggested, there's some sort of assumption, is it going to fall to the police chief to do that? And if it's not clearly articulated how we want to do that, then my fear is that it's not going to happen. And the last thing I would say, I know I'm not the only one that has heard this, is I've made it a point to ask our restaurant owners in particular what their experience has been, and they are very frustrated right now by the notorious folks who are parking their vehicles all day long, every single day.
So that's why we should take the bags off the meters and reinstate it.
I actually agree with that, I think,
do I.
now that you bring it up. I agree
I
with
would
it.
absolutely agree.
I struggled to park on the square at 4:45
Yes.
today.
Yes, so
We
I think it's been long enough.
we have consensus? We didn't do this by motion.
Consensus.
All right, we have consensus to take the bags off the meters and get people
We,
paying.
we can remove the bags. I can talk to Chief. Might take us, a few days to a week, maybe two, to get them all back in service. Going through, checking them, making sure they're still functional.
Yeah.
There are some that are not in great shape.
Well, make a suggestion, if they're not in great shape, you could probably leave a bag on the ones that like you think are gonna cost a lot of money, I think.
Check.
I mean, it's gonna be a free parking spot, so
Yeah.
it's first come, first serve, and hopefully it's not in front of a restaurant or anything, so, I mean,
At that point, is the bag even necessary?
well,
No. How quickly can you move, if you've got one that's functioning well somewhere, how quickly can you get it to a different place? I'm curious. Because if you've got some that are broken in high-traffic areas, it might make sense to assure those are working well.
put the rundown one somewhere else,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
I agree.
Yeah.
yeah. Any other comments?
I would just ask if, just so we leave this meeting with a very clear expectation, are we asking our town manager in concert with our police chief, whoever it is needs to be, to maybe lay out more clearly what the 3 to 5 year net gain you had mentioned, Chip, depending on the digital meter option, that it would be 105,000 initially, and then we would see, going positive and have a gain 3 to 5 years out. Can we have something like that at least 2 meetings from now that lays out that option? And then if we were to go with the company that has the kiosk where you can pay digitally and they take a portion of it and provide all the materials.
So to Councilman Kaiser's point, if we did digital meters, that the cash option's out. So the kiosk,
I'll take cash too.
the ones, I guess maybe it was the ones we looked at that didn't, we were
I
talking
think
about.
the ones in Ocean City take both.
The ones in
They
DC take both.
Okay.
I think.
Well, if we look at a kiosk, you've got that option. I think it's, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, $500 a month in rent, and I think they take 3.4% off the top for, yeah,
Per kiosk, yeah.
Yeah,
It is.
I agree that it would just be helpful to see it in writing.
Yeah.
I know it's a pain to haul the quarters and enforcement's a pain.
Yeah.
I'm, like I said, very disinclined to spend a whole ton of money on parking meters.
How many spots one kiosk, you can put in one kiosk to pay all over town, or is it one certain area?
It'd be certain areas.
Yeah.
Just because then you get into somebody parking over by the library that's got a,
Right.
and if they look up and they don't see a kiosk, then,
Right.
kiosk is over here. If they're visiting, well, where's that?
So we would need two, one in the square and one by the library.
Yes.
And I think the best model, just for whatever it's worth, we've all probably used it, is the one where you can either walk up to it, and Ocean City has these, and so you can put your cash in, you can put your card in if you don't have the phone app, or you go on your app
Yep.
and you pay. And then what's great about that is it sends you a text alert, you have 15 minutes left, which is great because it provides some additional, non-human support of the enforcement that we're not paying for. So I just think it would be nice if we maybe had these two options, Chip, and if everybody else here agrees, and we could map that out. This is year 1 through year 5. Here are our two options, and then
I think if
make
we
a
do,
decision.
if we do the mid-March meeting, we could probably have full costing and several quotes on kiosks, and then possibly a request to make that purchase based on those quotes, and then looked at how long it would take to install them, develop signage and things of that nature to kind of get the process rolling, and put out something for a full-time enforcement officer.
And if you're going to give us a quote for something refurbished, I want to see a quote for it new also.
Yes, of course.
And then I think the last question we just need to make sure we understand is, regardless of what we do, is there something in the charter, in our own regulations, that says how we do it today that we would need to update if we decide to do something different? I'm not sure what, if anything, is in.
Right, if it's in the code.
Can we just get a number also in this math of what it would cost to replace our broken traditional meters
The
with
same type,
new traditional meters?
okay? It's,
That was for the digital ones.
I'm in the wrong business.
Holy smokes. Okay, thank you. Anything else on parking? $3,500 per meter.
So wait, it's 3,500 for the old meter and 3,000 for a refurbished digital meter, but that doesn't take cash at all.
Not the ones that we had looked at. no.
Do you think any towns that are moving to like electric meters are selling their old ones for cheaper than 3,500?
Can we call Jen and get their meter?
That,
Yeah.
We bought things on eBay before.
Chestertown is,
7,000 to 8,000 for new digital.
oh,
per
Yeah,
meter.
Chestertown's totally abandoned their meters, and Denton has switched to the kiosks.
What do you mean by totally abandoned?
They're not, they've had free
They don't-
parking for like
yeah,
5 years now.
yeah.
Do they have signs that say 2-hour parking and then someone?
No,
But they also have a ton more parking than
Right.
we have in public lots, or like a lot more public lot parking around their buildings too.
Gotcha.
anything else on parking meters? All right. Moving the new business, current debt discussion.
Yeah, that's good. All right, in front of you, you have just a short memo from me. And then I wanted to give you the breakdown of our current debt, what the principal and interest, what funds pay it, and how they're broken down between series within the bond. So, the following debt and loan spreadsheet I've completed for your review. It shows all the outstanding balances the town owes on its debt. We currently have 3 CDA bonds, Series 2012, which after 2022, the lockout period opens up. And so the lockout period, when we go into bonds, you get a lockout period where you're not allowed to pay off early, make extra payments, those such things. So the only bond at this time that would even fall into that purview would be the 2012 bond, which unlocks this June of 2022. We then have the 2016 bond and the 2017 bond, both are which were locked for 9 years. So the 2016 would open up in June of 2025, and the 2017 would open up in June of 2026. So if you look at the current spreadsheet behind, I'll just kind of overview, and if you have any questions about debt, want to have any discussion, just let me know. So the first bond listed is our MDE water quality bond we have with MDA. The total annual payment is the total balance is $498,000, and all of that balance belongs to the enterprise fund. The 2016 series has a balance of $5,725,000, and these balances are as of June of this year coming, so there's still one more payment before then, but I wanted to give you at the start of a fiscal year. And so of that 2016 bond, $2,862,500 is billed to the general fund, and $2,862,500 is billed to the enterprise fund. So that's a 50-50 split. The 2017 bond, which covered Liberty and Commerce, the balance as of June 30 of this year is $6,527,000, all of which is billed to the enterprise fund. Oh, my formula is wrong.
Yeah,
I'm
those
sorry.
numbers don't
I
add
just
up.
noticed
Yeah.
that. So I'll correct that and get you a new copy. I think it's just the way the payment broke down. The bottom one is incorrect. And then the final bond, the 2012 bond, and we currently have a balance of $1,463,600. $1,097,700 is billed to the general fund, and $365,000 is billed to the enterprise fund. That is the one that unlocks this year. So if there was any discussion on early payoffs, paying some higher than what would actually be due, this would be the bond that discussion would be with. So total as of 6/30/2022 with bonds and loans, the debt is $14,213,810.
Which has gone down substantially since
Yes,
October 2020,
yeah, and since I started, I think it was at like 18 million.
17 when I ran.
So we're improving, and Chip and I have been having discussions for when we have budget this year to maybe present some options that we could do to reduce some of it, to help save us interest and admin fees in the future, so.
So thank you for this, Karen. On the 2012 A1 bond, or both 2012 bonds.
Yeah.
Your interest column, the 54,654 is interest owed this year?
All right, hold on, where are you at?
The very last one.
Oh, yes, that will, so I'm sorry, what you have on the right side, it will be the payments for FY '23.
I see.
So if we made any payments against the 2012 bonds, say we wanted to pay a lump sum when, when the new fiscal year started, those could be adjusted based on any payment that we paid. We get a new amortization, some of them could lower. And there's also an option of discussion to pay the 2012 one off. And so then, over time, you're saving about
$353,000
in interest and
fees.
admin fees.
The-
So
Over what period of time?
2032, so 10 more years.
Pay it off 10 years early. The permanent fund currently generates $11,000 in interest. In interest and fees alone in our debt, we are pushing about $456,000 out a year. And so using, one of the proposals we bring forth in the budget is that using the public utility tax money towards the debt vice the permanent fund, because we're going to, 54, just on the series, the 2012 series, we're going to pay $54,000, almost $55,000 in interest, and the permanent fund's going to yield $11,000 in interest. That's a loss. So trying to attack in the budget that we're going to be proffering both debt while maintaining some investment in capital is going to be our goal to present to the council.
So as of right now, as you all digest all of the departmental submissions and consolidate all of that, we might be well positioned to include a payoff of the 2012.
There's a possibility. We're still crunching numbers. We've had our first two sessions with each department to kind of start pulling things together. The budget will be presented to the council on the 17th of October. 17th of
March.
I'm going the wrong way. March, 17th of March.
There you go.
But some of those things we'll be putting forth a number of things for the council to consider, from capital needs to debt reduction to a combination of both, but for you all to kind of look at and have a spectrum of things and combinations of things to make the decisions you need to make.
For people that haven't been through, two council members have not been through a budget cycle, the public utility tax was increased dramatically
The last two
the last
fiscal
2
years.
years, right.
We were at
and-
$3.11, and then we went to 7, and then last year we went to 13
$13
per 100. Yeah.
per $100 of assessed value, and so we've talked about this some before, but Delmarva Power's got a facility in town, so they're paying pretty big freight. But half of the PUT goes to the permanent fund, right? Is that-
Correct, yep. So, yeah, this year, half will go to the permanent fund, half stays in the general fund.
Right.
And each year, you make the decision as a council to decide if it all stays in the general fund, if it's used to pay this off, if you split it 50/50.
So what is to Town Manager Kugel's point, what is the current interest rate on the permanent fund?
You mean what the interest we're earning at the bank? 0.45.
Right, so we're earning 0.45 on PUT permanent fund and paying 3.5
Correct.
on
Yeah.
these bonds. So I think it does make sense,
Mm-hmm.
To,
And I'll make sure when we start budget, you have the bank balances, so you can see what fund balance is. The last couple of years, where things didn't get done, fund balance did increase a little bit, so there may be some room there to look at other options as well.
good news, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
much.
Thanks, Karen.
Fireworks. Who wants to illuminate this topic for us?
I shall. So, this is on the agenda to talk about when the council would like to have, and if they want to hold fireworks in the Family Fun event, and what, if so, what day. So, we typically in the past have always done it the Saturday before 4th of July.
The second this year.
Yes.
Yep, July 2nd.
Which is the 2nd. Last year, it was planned for a Saturday, but issues with our fireworks contractor, we had to move it to Friday, which seemed to be extremely successful that night as well. We've also had it on a Sunday, so
Friday night would be what day?
The first.
first, yes.
We have not had a rain date when we've done this up to this point. Is that correct or no?
We do have rain dates. It's
The week after? 2 weeks after?
I kind of work with the contractor to see what
I'm sure
You
they
think
have.
you have?
what they have available. We have we had a rain date before? I'm trying to remember.
Like, have you had to use it?
I can't remember. That's a shame.
I think we should do it Friday the 1st because we're trying to get First Fridays going as the weather gets warm again, and it would just be in place of that month. And if it was successful last year on a Friday,
It was
I
very
feel like we have less competition on the
Because they're
Friday.
going, the county's probably going to have theirs on the 3rd, so.
Yeah, and we try and avoid the 4th. First of all, it's more expensive.
Yes.
Second of all, the county normally has theirs around or on the 4th or the day before,
yeah.
one or the other. So, and we try not to compete too much with surrounding towns, you know.
I like the first.
Yeah.
Me too.
And then is everyone okay with the family fun event that happens beforehand as well?
Yes.
I think we would get a lot of negative feedback if we got rid of that, just based on the volume that to me continues to increase.
I would just say that this feels like a prime candidate for something that the private sector ought to pay for. Through donation, I mean, I include the fireworks and the Family Fun Day as a prime example of something that some private entity, business, whatever the case may be, should pay for.
We do get donations. So the county, the total cost of our fireworks are $10,000. The county pays $5,000 and the town pays, no, I'm sorry. The total cost is $7,500. The county pays $5,000. I usually make a request to the commissioners each year. They pay $5,000. The town pays $2,500. And we have $5,000 in the budget for the whole thing. And then we put $25,000 towards the event. But we also get, the American Legion normally donates as well towards the event. So,
Yeah, I feel comfortable with the town spending that kind of money on it. I think there's something to be said for family events and amenities that the town provides. There's a place certainly for the private sector to do events, but I think things like Centerville Days and fireworks, that's what's great about living in a small town. So I feel comfortable with that expenditure.
I do too. I will say one thing I'm curious about is, like, I remember from last year, the firework company itself raised the fee of the fireworks. So
yeah, because that was the norm with everything.
Yeah.
So we had less shells, yes, than we have in the past. So the fee, what we paid was the same, but the number of shells we
the
got
show was a
were
little shorter.
a lot shorter.
Yeah, a lot shorter.
Still seems great. I don't know, it goes off right behind my house.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So, the other thing we didn't have last year were rides, which we
Right.
typically do, and we made a decision not to do that because of COVID, and having to, who wiped the stuff down in between and all that kind of stuff. So
Hopefully we can bring some
I
rides
think
back.
we're going to try and bring rides back this year.
Cool.
I mean, do you guys have any thoughts on the length of the show from last year? Are you comfortable with that if that's the same length this year?
I don't recall being like, man, this was terrible and short, so
Okay.
I'm sure it was fine.
The only complaint that I would offer, and I know we can't get around this too much, is just the lines for food were insane. And that's what we get
Last
feedback
year was the largest crowd that we've ever
Yeah.
had. And then we have also in the past held it to, we only do nonprofits, which allows them the opportunity to come in and raise money for their organization. So we typically have the same 3, 4 We have had the creamery, the creamery started out with us on the very first 4th of July because nobody offered ice cream and we thought that would be cool for a, hot evening. So, and now we do have one vendor that offers ice cream, so we asked the creamery to do, smoothies and that kind of thing, so.
And it's always just been nonprofits? So no food trucks or anything like that?
No, we've always done nonprofits to help them, and then the nonprofits are also not, aside from drinks, and maybe a few side items, they're not really allowed to either offer the same types of food.
Right.
So if somebody's doing a hamburger, this person's not doing a hamburger, so. But I don't know, last year that it would have made a difference because I was overwhelmed with the number of people, which I thought was wonderful.
Is
But
it hard finding the nonprofits who want to participate?
some, yes. I mean, I still have the same ones that come each year, and we have solicited other ones, and they either don't respond or they respond, but then they don't show up the day of. So if anybody has a nonprofit or is a nonprofit that's interested in participating, then yeah, I'd love it.
Because my only thought was if the more food vendors we have, maybe less people at the
Order
lines for the,
lines, yeah.
all the other ones.
And even if we just look at a model, I know we don't want to get too far in the weeds on this, but if we allowed some level of diversification, and if you were a for-profit entity, then you paid a fee, and we put your fee toward the fireworks, you might like, reduce our, because really, that's the only thing. I mean, I'm searching for a criticism of that event, and that's the only thing that I can think of. It's that well done.
Yeah.
So,
Well, you should have been there our first year when we only had one vendor,
Right.
and that was Mr. Emery.
Yeah.
He was the only one there.
Wow.
And he had to go to the grocery store and get more food.
At least it was right there.
Yeah. It was crazy. That was our rain date. That's what happened. That was our rain date, our very first year. We had to change it, and then we didn't have the other vendors weren't available. So,
So we're good to go for Friday, July 1st?
yep.
Yep.
here. Love it.
Ordinance, anything else on fireworks? All right. Ordinance 2-2022, right of entry, first reading. Is this being sponsored by a member of the council, or?
Well, we talked about it, Chip talked about it a little bit at the last meeting, but Sharon actually has, I think, a few comments on it.
I'll just read the top here by way of introduction. This is ordinance number 2-2022, an ordinance of the Town Council of Centerville to amend the town's zoning ordinance, codified as Chapter 170 of the Town Code, to allow the right of entry for the purpose of code enforcement.
Can I ask a process question just for my own ignorance? So does this not have to have a council member that's putting it
That was
forward?
sort of what I was asking. Generally speaking, I would assume that a council member would have to
Request this?
offer this.
Right.
Is that your interpretation as well?
That's, I think, how it's happened for the past few years. That's not always been the case, but that,
It's been practiced, but
To
it's
me,
not
that-
codified.
To me, that process would make sense. I don't know. I don't
I
have a
tend to
problem
agree
with
with you,
this.
yeah.
It just would,
Yeah, I tend to agree. But for this, maybe let's take that moving forward and let you talk about this for tonight.
so this, if you do decide to move forward with it, it is an amendment to the zoning ordinance, so it will need to get referred to the planning commission for their recommendation. And this is just, in my mind, one small piece of what the code enforcement officer might need. This is for zoning violations. Obviously, there's a lot of other code enforcement issues that go beyond that. And so I think we need to look a little bit more comprehensively. There may be additional places where you also want to look at whether you need to add some type of right of entry. You also have to be careful. If anything that involves property that's lived in, there's certain rights of privacy that people have. So, but this is, a first step for the zoning part of it.
The text is on the back of
Yeah.
anybody that hasn't seen. Exhibit A. The zoning administrator in this case is the town manager?
Yes.
Yes, although he can have it direct an agent to have that authority.
And this will be, as it says here in letter B, authorized to enter upon open land in the town, so yards, right?
Yes, not inside premises or things like that.
Right.
The genesis of this was there were a number of issues where a neighbor calls and complains about somebody's piling up trash and things in the backyard that you can't see from the street.
Can you see it from the neighbor that complains? Wherever they can see it from?
Right.
Can't you see it from there?
In the case of the one I was involved in, no, there was a fence behind, unless you're going over the fence, we
So
couldn't.
that's not a zoning probably violation. It's more of a property maintenance, so it wouldn't be covered by
Yeah.
this.
So what would this cover, Sharon?
I mean, I guess there could be information you'd obtain about the use that's being made of the property or things like that that could be covered by this.
So if someone's zoned for one type of business and instead they're doing auto repair or something, that we could go.
Yeah.
Or if they built a shed too close to the lot line, you could go measure the lot line. You can't do that now?
I mean, with permission, you can go on people's property.
Yeah.
Is there an example of a time that we've needed to do this and we've been told no?
Not that I have, no.
But we haven't really had anybody out there enforcing either, so.
Right.
And
A little bit, but not,
If someone has a fence, I mean, does this mean that you could still go into their yard?
that, I think a yard would be open land.
I worry about the liability there with people's pets and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Me too.
Because if you open my fence, you're definitely letting a dog out.
Same.
Is this consistent in your mind with other towns?
I think this is modeled after Queen Anne's counties.
Yeah, I called the county planning and zoning.
Can the county enter in a property in the municipality or no?
Not for zoning, they have no zoning
They have no
authority within
zoning.
town, nor would they have any property maintenance. There may be other things that they.
But this would only cover zoning, not property maintenance.
Yep.
Should it be expanded to include property maintenance?
I think we should look at
think
a
it should.
comprehensive, there probably is some language. I know the International Property Maintenance Code has some language, so it just depends on whether we've modified that or not, or whether we want to. Sometimes those actually go beyond even the authority that you could enforce. I think the language in those is pretty broad, but.
I think this discussion sort of brings up, in my opinion, the need for a full-time zoning professional, which I know other towns around here have full-time zoning people. I know Chestertown has one, planning and zoning director. And it seems like, as we have projects coming up like Carter Farm, like Turpin, like other things, and like the everyday role of just zoning and code enforcement, I think it makes sense to think about a director of planning and zoning in the town. I'm curious what you would think about that, Jim.
I would be in favor of it. I think, as you had pointed out, we have a number of issues, and my sense is once that we've completed the wastewater treatment plant upgrade, we will see more interest in Centerville and having that interest in that growth, more opportunity for people to ask questions and have somebody that's fully versed in all those pieces. As a town manager, that's something I will have to dial into is what are all the zoning codes? Because now as a zoning administrator, there's a slight learning curve there. But with code enforcement, I think we're just tickling the edge of the need.
When were those roles combined, zoning administrator and town manager?
They've always been, haven't they?
No,
No?
we had a zoning administrator up until about 5 years ago, and
I thought
that
it was somewhere
whole
recent.
position was eliminated.
Oh, yeah.
That position was zoning administrator, watershed coordinator, code enforcement.
Yeah. And to me, it feels like the town needs a professional advocate for its own behalf in these development conversations, because I'm just convinced, I've become convinced as I've watched the planning process play out, that I just feel like we need somebody who's fully on our payroll to come in and say, my job here is to make sure that in the professional sort of administration of planning and zoning, the future needs of the town are met. The developer notwithstanding. Because I don't think any of us have the time or expertise to sort of sink our teeth into.
It's a full-time job.
It's a full-time job. It's a full-time job.
On this ordinance, I'd like to propose we table this for want of a council sponsor and to have it be more comprehensive. If we're going to do right of entry, let's have it cover everything we need.
Sounds fine to me. We don't have to vote on a motion to table, do we? Do we have to? We can do that. I agree with Councilperson Kaiser that ordinances and resolutions should have a council sponsor. And we should not be forced to vote on things that do not have council sponsor. And I agree with tabling. So all those in favor of tabling, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We'll table this for now. And we'll have a discussion about a grant writer.
Grant writer, so we've been looking at, I forwarded to all the council members via email a list of all the grants that have gone out since 2019 and the requests we have. And often what you're seeing in our grants are, a wonderful example are what the activities happening at the wharf right now, the pavilions going in, the new park and things of this. Well, these are additions to the town and nice to have. What I'd like to be able to do is have time or focus on things that help solve problems, things that would help with infrastructure. The current process for the town is the clerk, the chief of police, director of DPW are all writing grants germane to their department on an as time available. There's little to no time to dig in and research for new options and grants that are out there, particularly with some of the infrastructure stuff coming down at the federal level, to explore what things we could do. What we would like to do is not a full-time or part-time 20-hour-a-week type thing, would be a grant writer that we would say this rate for 60 hours per quarter, at kind of an as-needed if there are seasonal grants that they can explore. But this is someone that can research, draft, submit, and manage grants on behalf of the town. And that way, the real goal is to find the things we just don't have time to dig into so that we can, and almost to the degree of it paying for itself. This is a way to explore the opportunity without putting in the commitment to hire a full-time employee. And if it develops the way we hope it will, we can expand it the following year until we get to a point where we say, hey, we're maxed out, we're really getting as most as we're going to get out of this. And that may lead to a full-time employee, and it may stay as a part-time person that on a contractual basis, X number of hours per month or quarter. But we would like to pursue it and see what it can yield. We think that it's not self-paying, but they can bring in more than what we're doing now. As you saw, we're doing some good things, but I'd like to find things that kind of solve problems for the town and enhance the budget to take corrective action, vice the nice-to-haves.
So, first, I'm glad to hear that you are looking at it in terms of an hours over a period. You and I have discussed that that's just a better way, in my opinion, to have grant writers, and I deal with a lot of grant writers professionally. But I heard you say manage the grant. Someone who's good at grant writing, not necessarily possessing the skill set of grant management. And so I also would not feel comfortable with the fiduciary responsibility that we would hold as a town to someone who granted us money, that a contractual number of hours a quarter person be managing the grant. So totally agree, someone to research and write, and then I think existing town staff would have to manage.
That was actually the question I had, and similar to your experience, worked with grant managers who wrote grants exclusively, and if they were funded, then if it was a grant for the police department, then the chief and his team take over that. So I would want that answered as far as the scope of such a person's responsibility to be limited to the writing.
Super. The gem in this is that they have the time to research it, the things we can't do. The management, I think, I won't say it's simple, but once all the research and stuff is done, that legwork, that grunt work and digging in and the yield and gaining of opportunities for the town is really what we need.
And if I was Karen and the finance team, I wouldn't want that grant management to be happening somewhere else. I don't know. I would want yeah, stronger controls there, yeah.
All yours, Karen.
Anything else on grant writers? Thank you, Chip. Moving into correspondence, do we have any correspondence this week? We do not. We'll move into reports of boards and commissions. We'll start with the Maryland Municipal League. Councilperson Kaiser.
Sure, so I attended the Maryland Municipal League's Young Municipal Leaders meeting last month. And it was interesting just to hear feedback from other towns of varying sizes about strategic planning was the topic, about how they're endeavoring to do strategic planning. And I mentioned to the group, that we're a town that's experiencing a lot of change, a lot of transition, and both our council, our staff, the needs of the town, just our changing town. And so they're going to be providing more examples to us of towns that have done strategic plans. The one that presented was Frederick. That doesn't really apply in terms of comparable size, but there are smaller towns that have done it too. And once I get that, I'll share it with all of you just to see what other towns have done.
Thank you. Councilperson Johnson, Economic Development.
So our Economic Development Manager, Paige Tillman, and I had an opportunity to attend the Queen Anne's County Historical Society's annual meeting recently. They have some exciting things planned for Tucker House. They've contracted with a master gardener to lay out a plan for the backyard and really spruce that up. There's talk of creating a really nice destination experience where folks could use that property for weddings and other special events. And they are looking at an entry point along the brick sidewalk that runs between that house and the library. And it just occurred to me, wow, how cool would it be if we could model something, involving some of our nonprofit organizations that are anchored around this type of thing, but create an arts, culture, and history walk that would be that piece of property there, that sidewalk. And so that's a conversation that I asked if they would be willing to continue to have, not with any interest of us paying for anything, but just an idea. But where they are and where they want to head is very promising, I think. And if any of you have been in some of our historic buildings in town that the Historical Society owns and operates, there's a tremendous need there. So it's a good thing that they are moving in that direction to deal with some of the disrepair. That's all I have.
Exciting. Councilperson Anania, Parks Advisory Board.
Parks Advisory Board, just wanted to let everyone be aware that the wharf pavilions have begun to go up, which is really exciting. And a member of the Parks Board sent an email out today, which I think was great, and she was asking about a ribbon cutting ceremony once all of them are done, and I think that's a great idea. Absolutely. And it's just a nice idea to get like the press out and maybe a Bay Times article, who knows. So I'm not sure what the ETA is on the completion of that project, but I think once it is done, we should schedule a ribbon cutting ceremony.
I agree.
That's it from Parks.
Council of Governments, Vice Chairman Keel.
They had, the biggest thing was the tax set-off. So the county, once they requested that we send in how we want to accept it. Of course, they urged everybody also to attend the tax set-off meeting, which is March 9th. So, as you know, I can't attend it, so.
That's the COGS tax set-off meeting? Okay.
Yes, yep.
But yeah, that's all the.
The other,
towns
the county
with-
one is,
I believe so.
the county's is April 22nd, right?
That's the hearing.
The hearing,
So
yes, so
the
if you
March
wanna-
9th meeting will be with the county,
Yes,
the towns with the county.
Yes.
and
Hosted by the
discuss
county.
tax.
Hosted by the
Yes.
county. It's at the Wharf Building.
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, it's gonna
Wharf
be here.
building.
It's going to be here.
Here, that's right, I
March
forgot I
9th.
changed it here.
Anybody with time on their hands should attend. All of us should attend that can attend.
Yeah.
I'll talk about the Planning Commission, and we were supposed to have a public hearing last night. The Planning Commission was supposed to have a public hearing on the growth allocation for Carter Farm development, and that meeting was canceled because, at least in part, because there is a real profound need to engage the public on Carter Farm. And I feel like we've had consensus from this dais numerous times. This needs to be the case. And I think if we would have moved forward with a Planning Commission hearing last night, the public would not have been there. And I think that would have been a real travesty. I think, as we look back, and we've talked about it frequently up here many nights, are some of the problems we've had in town with projects in the past, and the fact that the public doesn't know how to engage. I don't think this group of 5 council people, myself included, have certainly never been through this type of development. We don't know what questions to ask. We don't really know what our responsibilities are. And I think that's true for most of the Planning Commission members as well, a number of which are brand new, and a number more of which have at least never been through anything quite like this. I mean, it's been since really Northbrook and Centreville Village since we've had a project like this. And so I think we're, the mechanisms whereby the town makes these decisions can't just be allowed to go forward of their own project momentum without sort of taking a break and saying, okay, what can we deliberately do to get the public in here and explain this project and get them feeling like they've had the opportunity to get involved and learn more. So I know I have talked to the developer. I know the town manager has talked to the developer. They are interested, at our encouragement, in having a open house style meeting at the Wharf Building in the next few weeks, where they can put up their plan, their site plans, and their vision for the Carter Farm development on the walls. They can give their pitch for the project, and the public can be made aware of what's happening. We will deliberately send out invitations to, my preference would be for everybody in town. If you're a registered voter, or you're getting our emails, or you're getting other mailers, utility bills, you get an invitation to this thing, this open house. The developer has agreed to pay the freight on that mailing.
We had about an hour conversation with Carolyn and myself the other day to talk to them about both some of the concerns that have been repeatedly expressed by the town and a timeline of events. The open house is actually going to be in my office. It'll be at Town Hall. It will be an all-day event where people from the town can come in and out without having a 1 or 2 hour charrette where you got to come now, and that's when it's going to be. But they are going to make themselves available all day, set up displays around the office so that people can come in, ask questions, comments. I will be available to ask questions. Kip will be coming in periodically, answer questions, so that I think we'll get a better response with the expanded timeline where they don't feel like I got this 1 hour window and expect to kind of get a real input from the town. So we're going to expand it. Then and that will be on probably the 10th or the 11th of March. The email blast and so forth will be going out. After that, the TAC, there will be a TAC meeting on.
What's TAC?
Thank you. The Technical Advisory Committee. Technical Advisory Committee will meet. The stuff for the Technical Advisory Committee was due on the 1st. We got it on the 3rd. We've delayed that meeting. We need them to meet their deadlines, where they will look at it. Following that meeting that week, we're going to have a Zoom meeting with the Technical Advisory Committee and the developers. Rather than trading emails back and forth, get together, have discussions, clear up misconceptions, talk about what they're saying, what we're asking, so that there's a little more clarity. There have been times, my observation over the past several months, that the TAC has asked for something and it took time to get that, or it wasn't delivered as asked. So we're going to clear this up, get the responses so that the decisions can be made, then it can go to the Planning Commission. They are asking that on or about the 17th at that meeting that they be allowed to get a conditional approval for their plan. Conditional being the operative word that they've got from this body, so that they can move forward. What we have expressed to them in the most strongest terms is that the council is reticent to secure these allocations for you when we can't guarantee, because of the condition of our plant and because of our capacity issues, that those things will be there in a year. If there is a failure within the plant, if there is increased flows, that those numbers are not favorable right now, that the council can say to a developer, yes, we'll give you 130 allocations, and know that they'll be there. They've repeatedly talked about the possibility of a phased development that does not negate the possibility that those flows will not be there, and that we are, what we've asked them to do is hit pause for a year and wait for the monies and the decisions to flow down from MDE to start into the design and then build of the plant. And then they can come forward and go through the whole planning process and get to the point where the council is at a point where they know that the allocations are there for them. And
We have formally asked them to delay this process a year?
they have, not formally, we have asked, they said, would it be wisest to put this on pause for a year? And our response was, yes, it would.
Absolutely.
So, while I'm probably inclined to agree, I missed a time where this council said we wanted them to delay for a year. I just,
No, that was their proposal.
but then you said that, I mean, I just want us to be clear that the decisions have to be made in public up here and not,
Yes, that's
not
why-
because staff makes a recommendation with the developer. And then the other thing that I want to say is, while I appreciate that we're availing the developer of Town Hall, developers ought to be doing this work on their own. There ought to be no world in which they come to the planning commission or they come to this council and they have not had community meetings. So we shouldn't have to host it. We shouldn't have to make staff available for it. They should be doing this on their own. And so I just feel really strongly that any developer that come here and want to build in this town also invest in talking to the community without us having to say, you need to talk to the community. I mean, this to me is a no-brainer that they ought to be doing on their own.
I mean, they are sticking by, I tend to agree with you. They are sticking by their, the statutory requirements like a pillow. They are saying this is what the statute requires and this is what we're going to do, and we want to move forward because we have a construction schedule, which, as I think I've made clear to them, I know you've made clear to them, is not the purview of the town of Centerville. Their construction schedule, and I do have deep concerns about if they continue to move forward with some of these approvals, the momentum for this project is such that the ability to say no to allocations, I think becomes more difficult. The town will always reserve the right to say no. But I think when they could come back and say, well, we've done all the things you've told us to do, right? And now you're potentially not going to give us the allocations. So speaking just for myself, the notion of a pause appeals to me. And so I think that makes sense because we don't have allocations to give them. I mean, I sat with Kip last spring, when we had a really wet spring, and the notion of 130 more units that time of year on board, it was dicey then. And I think we would have incurred daily fees from MDE because we'd have been discharged into the creek in August. And so I know on paper we have a lot. We have hundreds of allocations potentially. I don't think in the way the plant runs, we don't have, and I think MDE could potentially tell us that. So I am for a pause, and I am certainly for them doing much more requiring and making it clear to them that we're not talking about you paying for a mailer. We're talking about you taking that's what sort of frustrated me last week was we've made it abundantly clear, to your point, that we want public engagement. And then they said, well, we thought you were doing that. And we say, we thought you were doing it. And so it just didn't get done. I'm not blaming anybody. But I do think we have to pause this at least for public engagement so they can understand what's happening down there.
So I'm conceptually supportive of a pause. I understand the reality of the wastewater treatment plant. What I'm not supportive of is a decision for basically an informal moratorium happening at any level other than by consensus of the five of us. And then on the outreach point, when I got my start as a lobbyist, I represented developers, and I had to hire college students to go knock on doors to get public feedback because it would have been unacceptable in Prince George's County to show up at any sort of planning meeting and not say, I talked to these 5 communities, or I knocked on these 400 doors, or I talked about the impact. And so I just think we have to expect what larger municipalities and larger counties expect. And so, I like the idea of the Carter Farm, just from what I've seen of it, but I'm just one person, and we approved an ordinance tonight with 0 public comment, and I would not be willing to do that on a development, just because the developer couldn't be bothered to reach out to the community.
Couldn't agree anymore.
Right.
So I agree, and I actually would like us to take a step this evening on the other point, which if we are going to have a pause, this is something that I have shared previously that brings me tremendous angst, and that is, and to your point, Steve, you know, while we do reserve the right to say no up here at any point, the fact that we have several projects right now that are moving, and minus us saying that there is a risk of not being able to approve allocations, there's obviously an opinion on the part of these developers that they're going to continue. And so I would like to see us, if we're prepared to do that tonight, it doesn't have to be a time frame, but if we can at least say we are all in agreement that we need to have a moratorium on allocations until we have more information on the facility replacement that's underway, and have more numbers around that entire project. I have a real hard time knowing that these projects are continuing to evolve when we all have up here basically said, we know we're not really in a position to allocate. So I would like to see us take action on that tonight, at least agree on a moratorium or whatever it is that we need to do.
From an awareness standpoint, just to let you know, I was going to talk about it in my time, the HOA from Symphony Village did go over to the wastewater treatment plant today to get a tour.
Okay.
To kind of see where we're at. And so there is some citizen outreach activity going on to kind of make them aware of the things that we're talking about in these meetings and let them have a firsthand look at what we're up against. You know, from staff standpoint, Carter Farm, Turpin, any other development effort is what do we need to do on behalf of the council. But from a staff standpoint, looking at the decay in our current infrastructure, that it's just fraught with risk. And as a developer, they've been told it is fraught with risk. It's not about liking or disliking the project. It is about the fragility of our infrastructure.
Right. Well, and if that plant goes now or anytime soon, that will be our next roads project. And if coupled with that is expectations on the part of developers that we haven't said that there is an allocation unavailable, then I feel like that's 2 roads projects again. So I would like to see us take a position on this evening. That would just be my recommendation. More than a sentiment.
We did a moratorium on building accessory buildings. Does somebody want a draft? Can we get a draft? I don't know who I'm looking for. A draft resolution for a moratorium on sewer allocations? Or can we just do that because it's not a zoning change?
It's not a zoning change, but I think the formality
You're gonna have
of
to go
such a
up.
big thing,
Sharon,
ordinance
you're
would
gonna
be
have to come
appropriate.
up.
Given the significance of it, I think moving forward with an ordinance would be the way to go, for even though we're not technically, it's not under the zoning code, so it's not an amendment to the zoning ordinance, but I still think it's a significant decision that would require the procedure and process of an ordinance.
Yeah, I'd want to have public hearing on it for sure.
Yeah. And if I can just add for the folks at home, especially if the developers are dialed in, that my suggestion for this in no way communicates that I am against any of the developments that are ongoing. I obviously can't speak for the rest of the folks up here, but I think the community is not only expecting but demanding a certain level of accountability beyond what we've all experienced with the roads project, and I think this adds some meat to those bones.
I think we badly need to educate this council, the planning commission, and the public about how this process works. Soup to nuts, where do these ideas to develop a property come from? How do they go from that to people are moving in?
Yes.
And where are the decision points for this body, for the planning commission? Where can the public engage? I think there's like 5 public hearings, right, in this process? So it's not, I mean, but I get a little angsty when I see, oh, we're about to make a decision here. I'm curious if everybody knows what decision we're making. What are we allowing them to do? What part of the process is this? And so I think a real layman's terms flow chart of process would be incredibly helpful. And then on the planning commission side, what decisions are they making and how are they making them? Right, because, I mean, as you know, Sharon, what they're looking at is a pretty narrow thing. Consistency with comprehensive plan and the application of the zoning code. It's not an opinion, really, whether you want to see the project or not. And I'm not sure that people understand that. We've got new folks on the planning commission, new alternate, and I think they need to be trained. And we probably have people that can do that. They've just maybe not been asked to do it, but to me, it's essential. Otherwise, we are lurching sort of from decision to decision. And I think if we make the right decision, it's going to be by accident.
Chris and I have had some conversations about putting together a flow, not only just here are the things that happen, but here are the expected inputs, here are the expected pieces that are required for the council to make decisions, and that we can look at that and say, I don't have this, and we're not talking about it until I get it. And then not only doing that, but laying out, it's like, if we tell you, you have to have this by the TAC by this date, you'll have it to the TAC by that date, or we're not going to consider it. If it's got to be, as you asked for, Mr. President, 10 days notice from the TAC to the Planning Commission, it's got to hit the 10-day mark. So some of that will be on the staff to make sure the flow is there, but the other part's going to be on the developer to say, here's our timeline, here's our process. You have to meet it. We do it with the state. When they tell us your application has to be in on the 31st of June, it's in.
Yeah.
Or game over. So if you're serious about this, so is Centerville.
So there is some mandatory training for planning commission members, and we're going to make sure that they've all received the information to do that. We're not sure that they've all done that yet. Some of them are fairly new.
All but the new one has, the two new ones have done it.
Okay. And then we also talked about having some training potentially from Chris or me or some combination for the planning commission. But then we also talked about potentially if you were moving forward with the Carter Farm, so maybe you want to see where this moratorium goes first, having a work session where Chris and I walk you through that process.
Mm-hmm.
I think that'd be really helpful,
Yeah.
I agree.
yeah. Irrespective of moratorium.
Right. Okay.
I feel like we've now said moratorium so many times that our emails are going to be like lit up.
I actually have one suggestion. When I used to work for King County Planning and Zoning, we had in the zoning code, it was codified responsibilities that developers had. They had a responsibility to do public outreach, and it was codified in, again, the zoning
I would
code.
gladly sponsor that.
So I was going to make that suggestion because I actually asked this question in I thought it was a state that I remember when I was there, us doing this, and I thought it was a state requirement, and Sharon said, no, it wasn't. So I reached out to King County and said, did we used to do this? I can't remember. And yes. So actually I can get their language and even, so.
And some jurisdictions have a certain amount of feet from a project, you get a specific notice. And, people pay more attention when they get a letter directed directly to them. 400 feet, 300, whatever.
Yeah.
There's a lot of places where you have that kind of.
And I had mentioned this, but maybe back one of my first meetings a few months ago. I live right by the Y project and had no sense of the construction schedule there until things started literally falling off the walls of my house. And so we don't do a good job as the town requiring even a builder like the Y to inform the immediate impact to community. And so if we're going to have more growth, we need to, when we do the wastewater treatment plant, any owner of property around there should know the impact. I think we have to do better.
Well, and if there's other municipalities, county level has language that's already in place that we can plagiarize and make our own, then let's do it.
Good conversation. Thank you. We will move into reports of department heads. Town manager.
Thank you, sir. As mentioned, we've talked about MDE, Maryland Department of Environment, and our responsibilities to them. The application went in And so I reached out to them to find out kind of what the timeline was going to be as we move forward. So in May will be the draft scoring of all the applications coming in from everybody asking for grants. And then there will be follow-on activities, amendments, follow-up from them or to us to make sure everything's ready. In July, they anticipate final scoring, and that funds will be available in or about October. So a fairly aggressive timeline. As I've mentioned before, planning and design will be covered 100%. And I asked them kind of a rough order of magnitude for our own part, because it is passed through, we're reimbursed, is how quickly MDE funds flow. And he said on average, using the SRF State Revolving Fund, that it's about 2 weeks, at most 30 days. So the flow through of funds that we could reimburse the contractors will be workable. The Bay Restoration Fund will also be in play when they pool their resources to fund our efforts. And I asked them about, the algorithm, and they couldn't delve into that until they start seeing more in our planning, but that they have not seen, without guaranteeing anything, that they have not seen somebody going from ENR or from BNR, the basic nitration removal, to the enhanced nitration removal. This is your fault, Ashley. That those funds aren't there. So we know to get back to where we are with all new equipment is going to be 100% funded. It's that from the 542 to the million, what part of that will they pay? And what other resources will we have to seek out to cover that if our overtures to the legislature don't bear the fruit we're hoping they're going to bear? So a great deal of it's going to be covered, and we're going to track that very closely to make sure that, at least probably for me on a bi-weekly to monthly basis, I'm talking to Matthew Marshall to say, where are we? Is there anything else you need? And keep that flow moving. Next issue, I've talked to the chief police and Sharon about this, is the police oversight and advisory boards that are being formed, pretty much nationwide, and particularly within our state, that I've reached out to Todd Mon, the administrator for Queen Anne's County, to see where they are in standing up what they're doing, and to request that our council be given a say in appointments to that body, because we have a significant police presence. And I did talk with Sharon about what Easton is doing from their perspective in standing up their own boards outside of that primary board at the county level. And she can expand on that a little bit about some new legislation that's being considered along that line.
I just happened to see today that there is a bill that would allow municipalities to have a police accountability board instead of relying on the county and being under that. I don't know whether that has any traction. It may be something you all want to see what MML is doing or taking a position on, or encourage or discourage, depending on your thoughts on it. But that is out there that the legislature will be considering, I think, this year. So.
You want to stay there, or are you?
Yeah, that's all I have for Sharon. We talked about Carter Farm. And my last issue of the night, council, is I talked with Wanda Levinson, a couple emails from the Maryland Department of Human Services. Maryland is standing up a low-income household water assistance program. It's a federally funded initiative. It is preparing to go live. It's brand new, and we're going to be a charter member of this. We've got the paperwork that Karen's team is working to submit on our behalf. What this does is helps low-income families with payments for their water or wastewater bills. It looks at folks who are 30 days in arrears and pays anything from $100 up to $2,000. It's a one and done. It's a one-time shot. So we are looking to stand our stuff up, and we are willing to have folks that have need to come in to see our folks, and we will help them with logging on, getting registered, so that we can help out some of our folks that are delinquent and get them back up, and then making sure that if they need help with a payment plan, it's something that will keep them from falling back into that hole. So we're excited about being part of this new initiative, and wanted to bring that to your attention tonight. And with that, I will defer to my department heads to present their pieces and parts, starting with
Chief Sabori.
See everyone.
Good evening.
Good evening.
So I'll just do a quick overview of the January 22 Centerville Police Department overview. We've consolidated as promised onto one page now. During the month of January 2022, we had a total of 6 apprehensions, 1 arrest for driving under the influence, 1 arrest for a second-degree assault, and 1 for violations of Maryland drug laws. We did serve 3 departmental warrants during this time. Issued 229 motor vehicle warnings, citations, and safety equipment repair orders for violations of Maryland traffic laws last month. Our calls for service actually went up about 1% from December to January, and we responded to 559 calls for service. Those types of calls include residential and commercial alarms, domestic disturbances or disputes, frauds, malicious destruction of property. We had, I think, 8 crashes total and a couple of thefts. Our speed trailer was deployed from Little Kidwell Avenue to Route 18 in the area of Hibernia Road. The final data received from the Little Kidwell Avenue location from January 1, 2022 through January 7, 2022 revealed 25,936 vehicles read. We had an average speed of 16.5 miles per hour. Our highest speed was 41 miles per hour. And the most positive thing, I think, is that the sign effectiveness was 53.5%. So we did see a significant increase of people that were reactive to the sign. And data from the new speed camera location out on Route 18 will be shared at the next council meeting. Our special assignments and trainings, we continue to attend computer automated dispatch, or CAD, and records management system, RMS migration training for the new countywide system. So the county Department of Emergency Services purchased a multi-million-dollar CAD RMS system for emergency services, which includes law enforcement and our emergency services, and we're happy to be a part of that. So we're pretty heavily involved in that migration, and I believe that's set to be switched over sometime in April, hopefully, if all the bugs are worked out. So it's exciting for us. Currently, the Centerville Police Department and the Office of the Sheriff for Queen Anne's County and State Police were all 3 on separate RMS systems. So this will give us the opportunity to go in and really get a great analytical look. There's a ton of data, and there's a lot of features that are with this new system that are going to give us a better understanding, not just what's going on in Centerville, but what's going on outside of our jurisdiction. And when you talk about cross-jurisdictional crimes, that's an important piece to fighting crime. So I'm personally excited about that. Walking trail follow-up, Council President Klein, I did send an inquiry to the Office of the Sheriff for Queen Anne's County, and Major Amoya was kind enough to answer a few questions that I had. I'd asked him what types of calls for service specifically related to the county trails. His response was that there were relatively little to no calls for service or responses to problems on the trail systems, which is encouraging. The trails are maintained by the Department of Parks and Recreation, monitored by members of the Sheriff's Office and Park Recreation park rangers. They too have responded to very few requests. The majority of the interactions are usually general questions about the county, the trail system itself, and occasionally best places to access the trails. I asked them how the trails are accessed. He says that the Sheriff's Office performs bicycle patrols and foot patrols. There's also a Polaris for general patrolling and access to the trail. They do have a group of community volunteers who use bicycles in their agency's small green gator, and the park rangers utilize a small motorized gator as well. Following that inquiry, I actually met with Mr. Fred McNeil earlier this week. We partnered up with Fred and his colleague Bill, who volunteered to ride the trails down on Kent Island. We partnered up last year to do a couple of bicycle patrols throughout Centerville on our trails. We had a really great discussion. I asked him the same questions, and he said some of the things that they've seen while being those eyes and ears out on the trail system were a lot of flat tires or mechanical issues with bicycles. There have been cases where they've had to assist folks that were injured that may have fallen off a bicycle, and they actually use that gator in some cases to transport people to a location where they can be assisted with EMS. Fred and I want to move forward and establish a police and volunteer trail monitoring program with an emphasis on police, volunteer, and community outreach. So in other words, we would want to equip our personnel and our volunteers that were interested in this program with maybe a trifold type of brochure that highlighted some of the historical things in Centerville, our restaurants, our places of business, maybe some of our local facilities if they needed to use them, put some water on the gator if maybe someone became dehydrated on the trail system. And certainly that's something that I think we want to seriously consider as the Centerville's trail system expands. So I'm really excited about that. My concern, again, is the challenge of access by law enforcement, by members of the police department, and other emergency responders. So that would continue, I think, as it exists now with the trail system that we have. We don't have the capability, short of a bicycle or foot patrols, to get in there and hold, maintain, and preserve a crime scene, investigate a crime, or necessarily take the police action that may be needed to be taken, because we don't have the equipment with us that we usually keep in our trucks. So that's something I would look forward to working to resolve.
Mm-hmm.
I like the idea of volunteers and the brochure. I think that'd be a great project for Page or Main Street to help with too. Just that the whole lift isn't on you or your volunteers, but to make sure that if we've got an opportunity to get information in the hands of people who are coming from out of town to use our trails, then I agree we should take it.
Yeah. Thank you.
I have a quick question.
I'm not done yet.
Just since it was mentioned tonight, have you had a chance to form an opinion on police oversight boards, whether you would be more in favor of having this be a situation where we fall under whatever the county does, or Centerville to have its own? Do you have an opinion yet? And if you don't, it's fine. I'm just curious if you've...
I would agree with what Sharon said, that I think it's important that our council has some oversight on committee membership that would provide oversight for this police department. So, and these are discussions that are, there is some police reform laws still in litigation, and there are some that will take effect July 1, one of which is the one that Sharon talked about. So I'd be happy to provide counsel with some of the laws that are set to take effect for consideration on maybe action that you want to take. That would be very helpful. Our prisoner transport partitions, this is very near and dear to my heart as it pertains to officer safety. We will begin to upfit existing police emergency vehicles with prisoner transport partitions. These transport partitions are new to the police department and provide additional layers for increased officer safety during prisoner transports. Imagine, if you would, a combative or violent prisoner that's maybe impaired by the effects of alcohol or drugs and transporting them in the front seat. Maybe they need to be evaluated and transporting them right there next to you, traveling down a highway at 55 miles per hour. So to say that these partitions are not desperately needed to keep our officers and the public safe is an understatement. The funding for the prisoner transport partitions have been identified, two of them at least, under the current FY22 budget, thanks to Karen for working with me on that. And so I actually placed an order today to have two of these units sent. It's my goal over the next several budget cycles to equip our remaining fleet with these added officer safety features. I'll be asking council under the FY23 budget for additional prisoner transport partitions so that I can at least equip half of our fleet to ensure that I have one of these types of, one of our emergency vehicles, one per shift, available if we need it.
What do they cost?
They are, I think they're about $2,500 each. it's $25,6385 plus about $1,500 for installation.
It wasn't until recently that I learned that our police cars didn't have this, having never been in one, thankfully. I find it not only concerning from a combative prisoner standpoint, but from a bodily fluid standpoint. If you have someone, impaired by drugs or alcohol. So I'm so glad to hear you've ordered a couple of them. I think it's unconscionable that we would put officers in a situation where there is nothing separating them from a perp. So,
And just for clarity, with the two that you've ordered, what percentage of the vehicles will then have that? At just those two out of?
2 out of 15.
Yes.
I have concern on that. I don't know what the financial outlook is for the remainder of the fiscal year. If there's a possibility to speed that up, that concerns me. Because my guess is, and you answer this, Chief, if you don't mind, if we do have a scenario where somebody's combative, higher risk for something happening in the vehicle right now, if we needed to transport that person, is your procedure that you have a second officer in the car just because of the dynamic of not having a partition? So, or you do not even have the luxury of doing that?
Well, that's a case-by-case basis. I was out recently, not to make this story time, but about in September of last year, I was out for a call for an emergency evaluation, and we encountered a very combative subject here in town who actually tried to attack us with a knife. We were able to subdue this person. I knew that I was not going to put this person in a car to be transported to be evaluated with 1 or 2 police officers. Fortunately, I was able to work with a supervisor with the Queen Anne's County Sheriff's Office who was able to provide us with a vehicle that had a prisoner transport system in it. So these are issues that, as the chief of police, I need to navigate through quickly. And we talk about liability and signing checks for these types of liability issues. And if this is something that we can do to keep our officers safe, keep them on the streets where they belong, and keep our detainees safe as well. And again, I completely agree with you. In fact, I talked with Karen at length about trying to find some federal funding under COVID or ARPA, where, throughout the pandemic, that didn't stop us from arresting people and having them sit right here next to us in the passenger seat.
Right.
And what other occupation in this town has taken that type of risk? We can't not arrest someone because of COVID. And why we've not had a partition between my officers and these people throughout this pandemic is deeply disturbing to me, and I want to I appreciate council's consideration to move this along expeditiously.
Well, and I would just say, first of all, we applaud your effort, and I think the fact that you're willing to be financially prudent and phase this in is great. So I don't want to take away from that. That being said, and I'm just thinking out loud here, if you start with just 1 per shift and that officer is transporting somebody to the hospital or to the detention center or whatever, the second car now that's available for an arrest does not have a partition.
Correct.
So I would just ask if this council supports this, if we could get some sort of proposal, maybe at the next meeting, that articulates something a little bit more progressive. Maybe it may not be that we do all at once, but if.
And ultimately, he could order as many as you told him you would want him to do. And what we would do is, overall, if B10 at the end of year update goes over budget, we would do the budget amendment at the end of the year.
Yeah, I'd love to see a proposal for that too. I'd also be curious if GoCap or other state agencies that have access to ARPA money have some ability to help fund something like that.
And so
Thank you for coming up.
the current ARPA funds that we have right now, with the new,
No, not our ARPA funds.
Oh, okay, you
To
mean
reach
outside
out to
of-
the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention and see what they might be doing with some of the ARPA funds they have access to.
okay, yeah, we can definitely do that.
Because maybe there's not a posted grant right now, but I don't know. Let's look at all the opportunities to get I mean, to me, not even from a COVID, I wasn't even thinking a COVID standpoint, I'm thinking like someone's blood standpoint.
Yes.
There's gotta be a partition.
I would like to see,
Blows my mind.
if we could do half now and half in the next budget cycle. That's me.
If we did do half now, half next budget cycle, does that get you 2 per shift minimum? Or do you need to look at that?
That would still be one per shift.
Okay.
Well, how many sheriff deputies' cars have this in them, you think? All of them?
Say all of their patrols, yeah, all
Yes.
their patrol vehicles.
That's what's concerning me, is
Supervisor,
it's such a
yes.
huge discrepancy.
This
in
is
practice.
something Joe and I talked about, and Chief and I talked about early in my transition, that we need to do this. And then we met this week and started looking at some things, and our department head discussion was, let's execute too fast and get this moving, vice waiting for 23, which was where we were, based on the number of budgets and what was approved last year. So I'm more than happy to,
Yeah,
accelerate.
If you're okay with that, Steve, we maybe have a couple of options at the next meeting.
We'll crunch the numbers and see what it's going to cost to get us there.
Need to get it done.
Yeah, I just think,
I'm with Ashley.
to me, that's a basic health and safety thing, and I feel sorry for your officers, Chief, that it's taken this long for that to happen. So I'm committed to making sure we see it through.
Thank you.
To add to that, something Councilperson Kaiser and I talked about earlier was that, look, having a police force is an expensive thing, but if we're going to do it, let's do it right
Yes.
and properly fit
And to
it.
be clear, I was saying, we're gonna do it. Let's do it right, not,
Yeah.
let's not. I'm already gonna be answering moratorium emails, Chip. I don't need.
Sorry, my lack of eloquence on that,
But yeah, no, but then I think we have to outfit all of our town departments with what they need to be successful. Otherwise, what are we doing here?
Good question.
Do I have a question?
No, I was just saying.
Oh, that was a good question.
Yeah, what are we doing here? You all
We're
done?
talking about the next item I have on my list,
Perfect.
which is a canine update. The town of Centerville has utilized 6 police canines in the history of this department. Most recently, Canine Crush retired after approximately 9 years of service with the Centerville Police Department. During his tenure as a certified police dog, Crush has collected the following accomplishments, and I'll highlight this at a later meeting, obviously. 1,728 hours of rigorous police training, 626 drug sniff scans, seized approximately $32,000 worth of U.S. currency, and which is really the most impressive, I think, is he had 8 police dog apprehensions without once having to bite the suspect. So the suspect peacefully surrendered and without any the damage, and that says a lot about the discipline of both the dog and the handler. Sergeant Larimore is now partnered with Canine EC, who is fully certified and licensed as a patrol narcotics and patrol tracking and narcotics detection canine. The option for a second canine team for the police department was discussed and approved by council during the FY22 budget hearings. A sworn member of the police department has been identified for this position, and with council's approval, I would request permission to move forward with the selection and purchase of the second police canine team and equipment associated with this. A memorandum regarding this purchase is included within your packets, which is a quote to purchase a single-purpose narcotic detection canine for the town of Centerville Police Department. The purchase of this canine does not exceed $20,000, which was improved under the 2022 budget. The quote for the canine was provided by Delmarva Canine LLC, which is a local reputable and proven provider of police canines and canine training for law enforcement agencies across Maryland's Eastern Shore. You have the very lengthy quote in front of you, but the abbreviated version is provision of a police canine from a reputable breeder, initial and annual recertifications of the canine and handler, lifetime canine performance guarantee, and a lifetime canine health guarantee. The options for the equipment, supplies, and housing which are offered through Delmarva Canine have been declined. So the total single purchase of the single-purpose narcotic detection canine is $9,100.
Based on the fact that we just passed Resolution 1-2022, do we have to approve this?
It doesn't go into effect until April 8th.
right, thank you.
Okay.
I'll make the motion. Not that you asked for it, sorry.
Just to be the devil's advocate here, and I supported this as part of the budget conversation. This is 2 of the prisoner transport modules we just talked about.
Yes.
So I think, is there a need to prioritize that over this, since we have a dog in place now and we have a canine and doing a lot of these functions? I guess I just, I think at some point we have to ask the question, right?
Yes. So there will be 2 vehicles, one operated by me and one by Lieutenant Meal, that will not have these prisoner transport partitions in them. And then typically the 2 canine vehicles do not transport prisoners either. They're set up where they can, but just to avoid any types of potential liabilities or transport concerns, usually we have one of the patrol officers that would have this partition in their vehicles do the transport. So while our fleet is 15, we have 13 and 2 spare. We would probably not need to upfit that entire fleet at this point with the prisoner partition systems.
My question is, what's more important to have right now? The prisoner transport partitions or the dog? If we have to make tough decisions, or do you not want to make that call?
I don't know that I'm prepared to make that decision, because I think that they're both vitally important to our department and this community. I think that the canine program I'm incredibly supportive of. I would have a canine working on every shift if we could afford it, because they are invaluable resources to this police department. I think that to support the culture and to be a significant piece in fighting the war on drugs, specifically, we came out of a heroin pandemic into a COVID pandemic. We never really came out of the heroin pandemic. Just the COVID pandemic kind of superseded things, I think. But we've got to have the tools, and I'm in no way prepared to say that one is more important than the other, because they are both equally important.
So, looking at this memo, the council in the last budget approved $20,000 for the purchase of the dog. So, is where you got the money for the 2 partitions already from the excess, or we would be able to say that the dog plus 2 more partitions could be covered by this one $20,000 item?
We don't anticipate using this full $20,000. So I would ask council to be patient before asking me to select which one's going to be more important until we can determine maybe how much money we can turn back in, and then maybe use some of that money that was pre-allocated to funding these partitions.
Is it a reasonable expectation that by the next meeting we could have those options?
I think I'm comfortable in advocating for the chief and saying that we can find that money for both.
And I just want to say that in the spirit of the ordinance we just passed, where if we're this April 8th, this wouldn't be in front of us.
Yes.
I would like to make a motion to approve the purchase of a single-purpose narcotics canine for the Centerville Police Department at the cost of $9,100.
Second.
Any discussion?
So, gets approved, he gets trained, he's on the street. Do we get reimbursed if we send him to another department, or it's just, you know what I mean? If they call for a canine to go to, I don't know, somewhere on 213.
We don't, and I think the agreement is that if
It's a mutual aid.
correct,
Yeah.
and if there's a time that we don't have a canine on the
Right, they
street,
come
that
out,
we can
yep.
pick up the phone and request one of their dogs.
Okay, that's what I get, okay,
Or a transport vehicle while we wait for our
Yes.
vehicles to be fit.
yes.
Lieutenant Larimore, right, Lieutenant?
Sergeant.
Sergeant Larimore is handling both dogs?
No, Officer Sean Holden would be the second K-9 team. And we're really fortunate, because Sergeant Larimore not only is a police dog handler, but he's also a trainer. And so he can do a lot of the certifications where we're not paying additional monies that a lot of police departments will to send their officers to get recertifications or monthly trainings. We have that in-house. So we're very lucky that way, and I think that helps us out a little bit too. Absolutely. Financially.
So the canines are working with these guys every shift. They're coming in. That's how it works. They're in the car.
Correct.
So we got a motion in a second, don't we have to vote on it?
We're discussing it.
I don't want you to get too far ahead.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Thank you.
I didn't want you to forget.
Not that that wasn't enough, but I don't have anything else.
Now the important question though, what is this new dog's name?
We don't know yet.
Okay.
It's nameless. We
got
can take the name that is given to us from the breeder / canine trainer, or we can actually rename it. And I actually have a couple of ideas that are significant to the memory of people, and so we're throwing some other ideas around just to make sure that we're doing this justice. So
You always throw it open to the public.
Social media
we
contest.
probably don't want to do that, Mr. Council President. Can I go now, sir?
Yes. Town attorney? I have nothing else. Finance officer?
One thing, super quick, I promise.
Can't start talking yet.
Finance officer promises to be super quick.
Yes. So just wanted to have a quick discussion on our banking options. In the past, council has always wanted to have relationships with all banks in town, local banks in town. So what relationship we had with Queenstown, we don't anymore because the mortgage on the loan is gone. We have most of our stuff at Shore United because that's where we're earning the most interest. And then we have an account at BB&T that earns us no interest on our funds. They're not quite a local bank because now they have turned into Truist. We have a few $1,000s in fees that are charged to us per year to have this account. And so what this account is used for is strictly for AR box, which is if you go to your bank site and you want to do bill pay and you want to pay your water bill, you set up a bill pay to the town of Centerville, and then the money is deposited into the BB&T account, which then we transfer to Shore United into the enterprise funds. So if we didn't have the AR box, essentially what would happen is if you did that bill pay, a check would just then be mailed to the town of Centerville. We also offer the online payments. You can pay by check, by direct debit. Those charges don't come to the town specifically. And so I would just like maybe you to think about the process of possibly getting rid of the BB&T Truist account, as there is no benefit to us. No interest is earned, and the fees that we pay are a little bit outrageous for what we use them
We can
for.
do that with consensus.
Yeah.
I mean, it doesn't
Fine
make
by
sense to
me.
me.
And I would just add, my understanding is, and I had this experience with Centerville Day, that they have never been in a position to help support financially anything local
Yeah, because
unless
they're
it
not,
has a
even
natural.
pre-Truist, they're not local banks.
Exactly. And
correct.
so nothing against them, but
Yeah, we've asked them to change the type of account to lower the fees. We've changed account types. The fees are still there. We're still paying. It's
They're of no value to us. We're spending
Absolutely
thousands of
none.
dollars
Consensus.
just to have an account.
The account is of no value to us. Having a bank in town is of extreme value to us.
No, I-
appreciate their being here. But
From our
Yeah.
banking
Yeah.
perspective, yes. I have a mortgage there.
Anything else?
nope, that's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Director of Public Works.
Okay, just a quick information for you. South Pumping Station down here by Millstream, we've got a pump in it that's got a seal failure occurring to it, which means there's getting water inside of it. We're on borrowed time with it. I can't tell you the age of it because it's been in there longer than I've been here. So it's a 75 horsepower motor on this pump. We need to get another motor for it, swap it out, send that motor back to have it rebuilt, and we'll have it on the shelf ready if we need it again. Right now, early estimates, we're looking at $37,000 just for the motor end of this pump, and it's going to be 6 to 8 weeks to get. So the motor itself is a Fairbanks Moores. It's not like you can get a U.S. Electric motor to swap out with it or anything like that. We have to stay with Fairbanks Moores, so it's not a whole lot of options to call around and get bids or anything with it. So just want to let you know what's going on with it. I don't have the firm numbers yet, and like I said, that's the number for the electric motor itself. That may change a little bit because we've got to do a little bit of changing around on the length of the cable that comes with this motor. So, yeah, there's money in the budget, wastewater budget for it. It's not a budgeted item, but we do have a line item in there for these type of repairs and stuff. So, okay.
Did I hear correctly then that the plan would be purchase new, install that, have the old one repaired, and then put on the shelf for future?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. So that's the whole plan. As long as that one's, when we take it out, is still good enough to be rebuilt.
Yeah.
It'll be rebuilt, put on the shelf. So.
Big question.
Yep. Just a real quick information for you. As you folks are aware of the issues we've had with the well pump at Northbrook for probably the past 5 or 6 years, 8 years now, short-term lifespan compared to what should be the life of that motor, close to 15 years. So we finally got in touch with a very good electrical tech that came in, put a scope on it, was able to pick up voltage spikes that were occurring in milliseconds. And this gentleman has done his homework. He talked to the manufacturer, the motor company. He's talked to manufacturers of several different filters. And when I say filter, that's a wave filter to clean up the electric. It doesn't mean this is coming from the electric company. It's just in the controls and the way it's working. Come to find out, City of Laurel had the same issue with one of theirs. This gentleman found the filter, talked to the filter company, talked to the same thing, pump manufacturer, motor manufacturer. We've got a deal. He sent us a quote for this. I don't have things finalized on that, but if we replace and put a new motor on the pump and put this filter in, the filter company will warranty the filter and the pump motor for 5 years. This
How many
is
pumps have we put in that place since you've been here?
I think we're up to 9 pumps in 6 years, and 7 years.
$90,000.
So, and you know, for the most part, the life of these pumps are about 15 to 18 years, the way that they work for us. So we're into it deep on this. We've changed everything else. We've also tried a different type of filter, you know, different types of motor controls, replaced wiring from the controls all the way out and all the way down the well to the motor and everything. So I get some finalized number. I'll let you know what it finally works up at. But we've got some money in the budget to take care of this stuff too.
It's a real no-brainer, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
The filter's $11,000.
And I'll tell you, that floored me because I just knew when he was talking about this thing and the warranty that they would give us and everything, I was looking at $50,000 was in my mind. And when we came back with this, it was like, okay. So,
Kip has really bird dogged this thing. There were a number of false leads. We had arcing that was going to the ground and just things that you kind of had to catch it at the moment it happened. And when you're talking about a millisecond burst, you know, you're looking for a needle in a stack of needles.
Yes.
And he really has run this down and troubleshot, worked to the degree they would help. Delmarva Power would occasionally look at it and then remove their equipment without catching the perpetrator, and he got this guy and really did a good job. So we're going to nip this in the bud and stop the hemorrhage.
Excellent. Thank you.
That's all I
you.
have for you tonight. Thank you.
Thanks, Kip.
HR's not here. Do you have an HR update?
Yes, one thing, HR's, she had planned personal time off. Something I had put forward to the council in this memorandum is a proposal for the town of Centerville employees are invaluable asset in providing effective and efficient service to our resident and business owners. Local counties and municipalities are taking mid-year actions for cost of living adjustments. Queen Anne's County doing 5%. Denton is doing a bonus plus $3 an hour and an increase in July. Easton is considering moving 3% from July to now. I'm requesting council approval of a mid-year 3% COLA for employees. This increase will be effective on 1 March, beginning of the pay period, and included in the March 18th paychecks. This request is to provide a mid-year increase vice the planned COLA increase in the FY23 budget, effectively bringing it forward. The impact of the current budget is as follows: $33,392 from the general fund, $4,399 from the enterprise fund, for a total of $37,791 total to get us through the remainder of the fiscal year, and appreciate your consideration.
Do we know, Chip, what those other, I mean, we've been pretty consistently generous with steps and COLAs and things of that nature in the salary study. Do we know what these other localities did in the last 12 months for employees?
I do not. I do know Denton, in their case, they are significantly impacted because their pay scale is way behind the rest of the municipalities. In the past less than 6 months, we've hired 4 more people for DPW. We've lost 3 of them, to include another one today, who had turned in his notice. So, and it's, frankly, I observed 2 weeks ago, our guys out there in the middle of the night at 25-degree weather, repairing a broken water main for about $16 an hour. Now, that's what they signed up for. But when you can go to Walmart and stuff Schmidt's Blue Ribbon bread on the shelf for $18 an hour in a heated and air-conditioned environment, it's hard for us to compete with that, even as we try to develop a professional staff. And that's kind of what I'm competing against, that and DoorDash and Target and others who are paying that with a less onerous or physical job.
Any council members care to make a motion?
I'd want to hear from Karen on the affordability of this for the remainder of the fiscal year.
Within the current budget, I think we can manage to cover the $30,000 on the general fund side and the $4,000 on the enterprise side without going over for this. And, you know, like he said, with the constant resignations that keep coming in any little bit, you know, the salary study didn't affect every employee, just some. And it's just a small piece, but I think we can definitely take care of it with what we currently have. A lot of department, like B10 has salary from being down on officers. C11 will have extra salary from not having full positions for about the whole fiscal year, so.
I would be inclined to support this. We don't always have to do what the county does, but noting that the county has gone with 5% and what's being proposed is 3%, and noting what you said, I would be willing to make that motion if you'll entertain that at this time. So I make a motion to approve a mid-year 3% COLA increase for employees effective March 1st, 2022.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? All right, the motion carries. Town clerk?
Just a couple things. Last week, the retention schedule, I'm so excited, got sent to the state for our first review. So I'll wait to hear back. I'm not sure how long that takes to come back. This is my first time doing it. We submitted the quarterly report near completion of our FY20 facade grant, which we just got approved for FY22. So we have about $1,200 remaining on that, and so I'm looking forward to getting that closed out and get the new one started. As of March, the town's website will no longer be supported by Corsica Tech. They're no longer doing web development. So we will probably go do some research, look at some costs. Which we've never bid out our website before. I actually would like to bid that out, not necessarily for cost, but just to see what proposals we would get in and hopefully gear it more towards web developers who do municipal websites. So Main Street, just a quick update on that. Carol let us know today, she said she previously appeared before the council to get approval for the dates for Drink Maryland and Centerville Day, so she could start promoting earlier. She has received, for the first time ever, her first platinum sponsorship, which is above 1,000. So, and I know I'm going to mess this name up. Ed Barris from Barris Group Remax. He did a $1,250 platinum sponsorship for Drink Maryland. And this would be, I think I did say that, our first platinum that she's ever gotten. And then he also is on the planning group, and him and his wife normally do the parking signs for Drink Maryland, which are kind of old and rickety from when we first started the event. So he is actually purchasing himself new parking signs for the event as well. Their Facebook event and Save the Date post have resulted in 3 new corporate sponsorship inquiries and 2 new volunteers for their the Maryland Makers event, the Drink Maryland event. She also has plans in place to streamline the vendor application process for vendors, both June and October events. So they'll be able to go on and complete their vendor applications online and submit them electronically. And they have secured the county owns a billboard on 301, 404, or maybe it's both. And we've secured those billboards for the event, for the Drink Maryland event. So 2 other quick things. One thing that I talked to Chip about is implementing a vacant property registration. I think we had an option to do that a while ago, or we still do have the option to implement this. So if it's in foreclosure or anything, they're required to register with us, so we have their information. And it would apply to all properties. There also, which I didn't realize until I started to do some research, that there is a Maryland foreclosure registration system. So I went ahead and signed up for that. So we, as a government agency, can go on and look up properties and get the information from for those properties. And then the other thing we talked about was rental properties. Registering rental properties, periodic inspections, whether in between tenants or yearly. Other towns do it. Chestertown, Easton, they have a rental housing license that requires them to undergo periodic inspections and ensure compliance with regulations.
Benton does both these things extremely robustly, a rental registry and a vacant property registry, and there's licensing fees, and it helps their code enforcement. So I would encourage you to reach out to Denton too and get what they have, just because I know that they are extremely clued in. Their code enforcement emails rental property owners before a snowstorm to remind them of their liability. Like, they're on it, and you can't mess up there. So if we were going to model it after someone, I would want to look at theirs.
Okay, great. That's all I have.
Thank you. Moving to Citizens Forum. Step.
It's been about an hour. You guys are taking so long tonight. I get equal time.
Just give us your name and address and try to keep her to 3 minutes
You all know who I am, but I'll tell you anyway.
for the record.
Joe Brown, 122 Concerto Avenue in Centerville. So first, I'd like to ask the chief. The other prior police chiefs in town have always given a report written, made available a written report. Like you just give it to the council. Can you have a report so that those in attendance to the meeting can take it home with us?
Happy to do that.
Okay, that was always been done in the past. What Carolyn said about the rental property registrations. We have a lot of properties in this town that aren't being maintained. Eric and I took a little tour a few weeks back, and a lot of those are owned by people that don't live in town. So it's like they don't give a darn what the heck it looks like. And that's one of the goals hopefully we're going to get to. But the registration would certainly help. Budget time will be coming up soon. And in the past, when Smokey Ziegler was on the council, he formed a budget advisory committee that we worked along with the council to participate in the budget process. And I would hope that you gentlemen and ladies would consider doing that again. I think it was very helpful in getting a budget that people were comfortable with, and the citizens felt like they had some input. So something to consider. And you were talking about parking meters tonight. If you take the bags off, my experience with those meters is a lot of them, if they work, you can't read. The plastic is so clouded, you can't read when they're in service, what the fee is or anything. So if anybody wanted to try to pay it, you really wouldn't know what's going on there when the hours you have to do it. But I would hope that whatever you do with meters, talk to the business community. Don't just do this without getting them involved, because a lot of them I know have concerns about the meters and what's happening or not happening. So just don't do it arbitrarily up here on your own. Get them involved, and you know, it's easy to say, but they don't always get involved, but give them a chance. Okay. And Steve, your comment about the planning commission, you know, when I moved here, Eva was in charge of planning, and then she left and John Fury came. And John ended up getting sick a couple times and ended up leaving, and that place became vacant. But when I go to planning commission meetings, we have a contractor doing that job. And I don't always feel like he has the best interest of the town. He's a technocrat, or whatever you want to call him, by the book, whatever, boom, boom. There's no flexibility there. And I think where there can be flexibility, if we have a town employee there was, in, you know, looking out for the town interest, I think it'd be a better way to go. So you kind of brought that up tonight, and I think that's a good point. So I just wanted to mention that. I think I covered all my notes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You can have this.
Thank you, sir.
Got it?
Haven't seen one of these in a while. Okay.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you.
Anybody else on public comment? We'll move into council roundtable. Councilperson Kaiser.
Sure, I'll be super quick, just two things. The farmer's market is looking for volunteers for the Friends of the Farmer's Market Committee to help make that successful this year, and would encourage people to get involved. You can email them at centervillefarmersmkt@gmail.com. And so just, you know, anyone who's interested in helping the farmer's market, I would reach out to them. They're a small but mighty group of volunteers, and I know that they would appreciate help. The other thing is, I especially, but we've all talked a lot about code enforcement up here, and I do want us to get, you know, a cheat sheet together for the residents of the big things that are in the code, but just a couple examples that people might not be aware of. You have to have 8 feet of clearance between trees and the sidewalk. So if you have trees on your property that overhang the sidewalk and there's less than 8 feet of clearance, you should trim those and avoid getting a visit from code enforcement. Your grass has to be less than a foot tall, which to me seems very generous, but keep your grass less than a foot tall. And you can't have unhitched boats and trailers on streets or alleyways in town. And so I want to get a cheat sheet out to the town, but as we wait for that to happen for whatever reason, a couple of things that are in the code that people should be aware of. That's all I've got.
Can I add to that? And the trash cans need to be taken up. They can't be left out there all week.
That was probably the number one thing this past 2 weeks was unhitched trailers.
You got to come up, Joe. You can't speak from back there.
Go ahead, you guys finish.
All right, I appreciate that. Thank you. Councilperson Johnson.
I will be brief. So at the last meeting that I was unable to attend, of course, due to a medical issue, council and the community was talked about, and I just want to promise to the community and to each of you that I'm going to go ahead and lean forward and put together a schedule of the first opportunity for us to come to what would be 4 sections of the town: Providence Farm, the Historic District, and downtown Symphony Village, and then Northbrook and the Heights. And the goal, again, for those that are hearing about this the first time, would be that at least 2 of us up here would be able to attend these. And I like the idea, earlier in the agenda, we talked about maybe a flow chart that shows this, how things go from idea to folks moving in. And maybe that's something that if we just have 3 bullet points that we take to the community to say, here are 3 things we want to talk about, and the rest of the time is yours to just tell us how we're doing, what's important to your neck of the woods. But I'll start putting that schedule together, maybe late March, early April is kind of what I was going to suggest, and I'll work with our town staff as well on that. So for Northbrook and the Heights, we'd look at maybe having a meeting at the church, Symphony Village at their clubhouse, lots of opportunities for the Historic District and downtown location. And I think Councilwoman Kaiser's house would be good for the Providence Farm one, but we'll find something else.
How about my side of town? Everybody forgets about my side of town.
Yeah.
Where do I fit in?
I mean, Eric lives there too. He forgot
It's a
about
fifth.
himself.
Yeah,
know.
you forgot about you too.
I will make sure that you and I are covered. That's all I have.
Symphony Village.
Councilperson Anania.
Nothing to report. Yield my time.
I'll buy my time too. You can have it. Calling you.
I yield back as well. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Third.